There is a lamp at the end of your street that has never once gone out, and tonight I am finally going to tell you why. The people who keep it burning have a name and a secret, and a whole city you have walked through 1,000 times without ever truly seeing. So settle in, let your shoulders go heavy, and I will show it to you. Far beneath the ordinary roofs and the ordinary rain, folded into the seams of the world like a letter you forgot you wrote. There is a city called Halcyon Vale. By day, it looks like any other place. All chimney smoke and cobblestone and the soft complaint of old doors. But when the sun slips down behind the hills, the Vale does something no other city remembers how to do. It lights itself, lamp by lamp, on purpose, and the lamps are alive. You see, in the Vale, light is not merely a thing that pushes back the dark. Light is a promise. Long ago, the people there made an agreement with the night itself, and the terms were simple. So long as one flame was kept burning before the world went to sleep, the dark would stay gentle, and the city would dream sweet dreams. But should every lamp go cold at once, the dark would forget its manners. Something far older than nighttime would come walking through the streets. The agreement was struck in the long winter of the year 1409 by a woman whose name was Vesper. She was the first person ever to carry a single flame, all the way through the dark and out the other side, without letting it die. When she returned, her hair had gone white as ash, and her eyes had gone soft as candlelight. And she understood something nobody else did. The dark was not hungry. The dark was lonely. And a lonely thing, left alone too long, becomes a frightening thing. So Vesper found it in order, and she called its members the Wakeful, because their whole purpose was to stay awake on behalf of a sleeping city. There were 1,001 lamps in the Vale, one for every street and one extra, and the Wakeful tended every one of them. They were not soldiers, they were not wizards, exactly, they were lamplighters, and in the Vale that was the most important thing a person could possibly be. The slow darkness that the Wakeful guarded against had a name too. They called it the dimming. It did not arrive like a storm. It arrived like a forgetting. A lamp would gutter for no reason on a windless night. A street would go a little gray at the edges. A child would wake up unable to remember a song they had known their whole life. That was how you knew the dimming was near, and that was when the Wakeful went out walking with their flames held high. Now, into all of this lore and all of this old quiet duty, there came a small girl named Wren. She had no mother and no father that anyone could name, which in most cities would have made her invisible. She had been found as a baby on the steps of the lamp house on a night when, against every rule of nature, all 1,001 lamps had flared bright at the very same moment, as if the whole city had gasped. Nobody knew what it meant. They only knew that the baby in the basket was not crying. She was watching the lights. She was raised by an old lamplighter named Bram, a wide and gentle man with soot in the creases of his knuckles and a laugh like a kettle coming to boil. He was not her father by blood, but he was her father in every way that the word actually means. He taught her to walk by walking her between the lamps. He taught her to read by reading her the names carved into each lamppost. And he told her, more times than she could count, that the most important promises are the small ones you keep every single night when no one is watching. For the first 11 years of her life, Wren thought she was perfectly ordinary, which is a thing that happens to a great many extraordinary people. She swept the lamp house floor. She polished the glass. She got in the way. But she had begun to notice something she did not tell anyone, not even Bram. She could hear the lamps. Not the crackle of the flame, which everyone could hear, but the lamps themselves, humming low and content like cats in a sunbeam, each one a slightly different note. It happened on a gray evening in the autumn of her 12th year. A lamp on Merrill Lane had gone out, fully out, its wick cold and its glass frosted from the inside, and 3 grown lamplighters had failed to relight it. A dead lamp is a serious thing in the Vale. It is a door left open, Wren, who was only meant to be carrying a bucket, set the bucket down. She put one small hand against the cold glass. She did not strike a flame. She simply listened until she found the lamp's note, the one it used to hum, and she hummed it back to it, very softly, the way you might call a frightened animal home. The lamp lit, not with a strike or a spark, but all at once, like a held breath, finally let go. And it burned a warm gold that no other lamp in the city could quite match. The 3 grown lamplighters stood very still. One of them ran for the lamp house, hanged, and that was the night that the wakeful learned what they had been raising in their own front room without ever realizing it, because relighting a truly dead lamp was not a small gift. It was the gift, the one the Order had been quietly waiting for across 3 centuries of patient nights. There was a line in Vesper's oldest writings, a single sentence the wakeful recited but no longer believed, which said that one day a child would be born who did not light lamps but remembered them, and that this child would one day be asked to walk into the dimming and bring back something that had been lost since the very beginning. Wren did not feel like a prophecy. She felt like a girl who had skipped supper. But the next morning she was brought to the great hall of the lamp house, a round room with a ceiling painted to look like the night sky, and she was made an apprentice of the wakeful order, the youngest in its history by 4 whole years. Bram stood at the back of the room with his hat in his hands and his eyes shining, and he did not say a word, because some kinds of pride are too big for words. An apprentice of the wakeful learns slowly, the way moss learns a stone. First, they are given their tools, which are old and plain and matter more than they look. There is the striker, a small iron tool for catching a spark. There is the tender heart, a knot of treated wool that holds a flame for 1 full day and 1 full night without fuel. And there is the ember thread, a length of fine glowing wire that a lamplighter carries coiled at the hip, used to pass a single flame safely from one hand to another across any distance. Wren was given all 3, and a coat with too many pockets, and she felt, for the first time, like she belonged to something. She was not the only apprentice, of course. There were 2 others her age, and in the way of these things. The 3 of them became the kind of friends who feel less like a choice and more like a fact of the weather. There was Pin, a thin boy who was frightened of nearly everything and brave about all of it anyway, and who could calculate the burn time of any lamp in his head in under 3 seconds. And there was Sable, who was loud where Pim was quiet, and who had wanted to be wakeful since she was old enough to want anything at all. The 3 of them trained together through that whole long autumn and the winter after it. They learned to walk the lamp roots in the dark without a single misstep. They learned the 17 knots of the ember thread, okay? They learned to tell, just by the hum of a street, whether a lamp was tired or sick or merely sulking, okay? And they learned the first and oldest rule of the order, the one Bram had been teaching Wren her whole life without naming it. The rule was this: the light is not yours, okay? You are only the hands that carry it. And the thing you are only carrying, you must never, ever set down. Wren came to understand, as the months turned, why the dimming was so feared and so misunderstood. A lamp does not go dark because it runs out of fuel. A lamp goes dark because it has been forgotten, because no one walks its street anymore, because the people who used to love its particular corner of the world have moved away or grown up or simply stopped looking. The dimming was not an attack from outside the city. It was the city's own forgetting, given a shape and a cold, slow hunger. And forgetting, once it starts, likes to spread. At the very center of the vale, at the top of the oldest hill, there stood one lamp that mattered more than all the others put together. The wakeful called it the Vesper lamp, the great beacon, the very first flame that Vesper herself had carried through the dark and home again. It had burned without interruption for 317 years. As long as the Vesper lamp burned, the order believed the city's heart was safe, and the dimming could could only nibble at the edges. Okay. It was the lamp at the end of your street, in a way. Okay. It was the lamp at the end of everyone's street. In the second winter of Wren's apprenticeship, the signs began. They were small at first, the way the worst things always are. A lullaby went missing from the whole city in a single night, so that mothers found themselves humming and could not remember how the tune was meant to end. Then a street near the river simply could not be lit, no matter how many lamplighters tried. The flames sliding off the wicks like water off glass, then to streets, but then a whole neighborhood going gray at the edges, its colors leaking away while its people slept and dreamed of nothing at all. The wakeful went out in numbers, not seen in a generation, walking the routes in pairs and then in fours, holding the line lamp by lamp. But the dimming was rising faster than they could light, and everyone in the great hall knew the thing nobody would say out loud. If the gray reached the oldest hill, if it ever touched the vesper lamp, then the first flame would go cold. And the promise made in the year 1409 would finally, after all this time, break. It was Bram who volunteered to go up the hill alone. He was the oldest active lamplighter in the order, with 41 years of nights behind him, and he knew the route to the beacon better than he knew his own hands. He believed, and he was right, that the vesper lamp had begun to flicker, and that if someone did not go and steady it, the whole city would lose its heart before the next sunrise. He did not let anyone come with him. He said it was a thing best done by one set of old, sure hands. Before he went, he found Wren in the lamp house, and he did not give her a speech, because he was not a man of speeches. He pressed his own tender heart into her palm, the one he had carried for half his life, still warm. He folded her fingers closed around it. He looked at her for a long moment with his kettle-warm eyes. Hey, and then he tapped his chest twice over his heart, which in the silent language of the wakeful means, keep it burning, and he turned and walked out into the gray, and that was the last that anyone saw of Bram for a very long time. He did not come back. The hours passed, and the great beacon on the hill steadied, then flared, then held. Hand of Gray pulled back from 3 whole neighborhoods all at once, as if something enormous had pushed it. The city was saved that night. But the lamplighter who saved it did not return down the hill. And when, at last, a search party climbed up at dawn, they found his lantern set neatly at the foot of the vesper lamp, still lit, still warm, and no Bram anywhere at all. He had not died. The dimming does not kill, does something quieter and, in its way, far worse. It takes you in, and it makes the world forget you were ever there. I want you to understand how that felt for a girl of 13, because it is the center of this whole story. It was not only grief, though it was grief. It was the slow horror of watching a city forget the man who had saved it. Within a week, people in the streets could no longer quite picture his face. Within a month, the younger apprentices spoke of him in the abstract, the old lamplighter who went up the hill, as if he were a tale and not a man who had taught them to tie their boots. Only Wren and Pim and Sable held on to him, fiercely, repeating his name to each other every single night, so that, at least among the 3 of them, Bram would not go gray. And here is the lesson he had been teaching her all along, the one that arrived now with the full weight of everything it had cost. The light is not yours. You are only the hands that carry it. He had carried his light up that hill, and he had not set it down, not even at the end, not even when setting it down would have meant coming home. He had kept the smallest promise and the largest one at the same time. Hey, and now the carrying had passed to her, the way it always passes, from hands that grow tired to hands that are only beginning. The wakeful order, for all its courage, did not know what to do next. They could hold the line. They could light and relight forever, but holding a line is not the same as winning, and every lamplighter in that round hall understood, okay? In the part of themselves they kept quiet, that they were slowly losing a war made of forgetting. The dimming would always rise again. there would always be one more street that the world stopped loving. Unless someone did the thing Vesper's oldest writing had promised and walked all the way down into the heart of the dimming to bring back whatever had been lost at the very beginning. Wren decided to go. She was 13 years old, and she decided it the way you decide to breathe, without quite choosing. She did not ask the order's permission, because she knew they would say no, okay? And she knew they would be right to say no, and she knew she was going to go anyway. The child who did not light lamps, but remembered them. If the dimming was made of forgetting, then perhaps the one thing in all the city that could walk through it unharmed was a girl whose whole strange gift was that she remembered every single lamp she had ever heard hum. She did not go alone in the end, because that is not how the best stories or the best lives actually work. Pim came with his head full of burn times and his pockets full of tender hearts, frightened of everything and brave about all of it. Sable came, loud and certain, with a coil of ember thread long enough to reach across a canyon. The three of them slipped out of the lamp house on a moonless night with Bram's warm tender heart riding in Wren's breast pocket, right over her own heart, and they walked toward the grayest part of the city, where the colors had drained away and the silence had teeth. I should tell you what it is like to walk into the dimming, because Wren never forgot it, and neither will you. It is not dark the way a closed room is dark. It is dark the way a name you have lost is dark, okay? The streets she had known her whole life unspooled around her, but the harder she looked at them, the less sure she became that they had ever been real. The gray did not push at her. It coaxed. It whispered that she was tired, which she was, and that she could rest, which she could not, and that no one would mind, which was the largest lie of all, because somewhere a city was minding very much. This is where Wren's gift saved her, and saved her friends, besides. Every few steps, when the forgetting reached into her mind and tried to take a lamp, she would hum its note out loud, the warm low note she had been hearing since she was a baby in a basket. And each remembered lamp was a stone underfoot in a flooding river. Pim recited burned times like prayers. Sable shouted the names of streets into the gray until the gray flinched. The three of them held one another's memories the way a roof holds itself up, every beam leaning on every other beam, and so none of them fell. They walked for what felt like one night and may have been three, and in the deepest, grayest, most forgotten part of the whole city, in a place where the streets had worn away entirely and there was nothing left but a soft and patient nothing, Wren found a single small lamp sitting on the ground. It was the plainest lamp she had ever seen. Its glass was cracked, its wick was cold, and though it was utterly dark, she knew it at once, the way you know your own name, because of all the 1,001 notes she carried in her. This was the one she had never been able to place. This lamp was the first lamp. This was the flame that Vesper had carried through the dark, before there was an order, before there were rules, before there was anything at all. Canony had gone out. Now Wren understood the truth that Vesper had understood 3 centuries before, and had perhaps been too sad to write down plainly. The dimming was not a monster that had crept in from outside. The dimming was this. It was the very first light, the original promise, sitting forgotten in the dark for so long that its loneliness had spread out across the whole city like cold across a window. Every lamp that had ever gone gray had gone gray, because somewhere underneath everything, the first one had been left alone. The Order had spent 317 years fighting the symptom. No one had ever come down to sit with the cause, and there, kneeling beside the smallest lamp in the world, Wren also understood why no one had ever managed to relight it by force. You cannot strike a spark into loneliness. You cannot order a forgotten thing to feel remembered. The striker stayed in her pocket. The ember thread stayed coiled at her hip. Instead, she did the only thing she had ever truly known how to do. The thing she had done on Merrill Lane when she was 12 and frightened and carrying a bucket. Calm. She put her hand against a cracked, cold glass. She found its note, the lost one, the first one, K, and she hummed it back to it, and Pim hummed it, and Sable hummed it. 3 small voices in an ocean of gray, telling the oldest flame in the city that it had not been forgotten after all. The lamp lit, not with a spark, and not with a strike, but all at once. It's like a held breath of 317 years finally let go, and it burned a gold so warm and so deep that the gray did not fight it. The gray simply remembered itself. It remembered that it had once been a city full of streets, full of songs, and color came rushing back into the world like water finding its old riverbed. The forgetting unwound. The lullaby that had gone missing came back into every mother's mouth at once, with its ending intact. And on the oldest hill, the great vesper lamp flared so bright that people who had been asleep for days sat up in their beds, blinking, certain they had dreamed something lovely and unable to say what. When the color settled and the city was a city again, Wren found that she was not holding one lamp, but 2. Beside the small first flame, warming his hands at it as though he had only stepped out for the evening, sat Bram. The dimming had not destroyed him. Nothing in the dimming is ever truly destroyed, only mislaid. He had been waiting at the heart of the forgetting the whole time, keeping the smallest promise in the only way left to him, refusing to let the first lamp be entirely alone until someone clever and stubborn and kind enough finally came down to fetch them both. He tapped his chest twice over his heart, and then, because some kinds of relief are also too big for words, the 2 of them simply walked home up out of the gray together, with Pim and Sable and one small ancient lamp lighting the way. The city of Halcyon Vale never forgot that night again, and that was rather the point. The wakeful changed their oldest rule, or perhaps they finally understood it. They no longer believed their work was only to light the lamps. They understood now that their true work was to remember them all 1001. And the people on every street besides, because the thing that is remembered cannot go dark, and the thing that is loved cannot be lost for good. They began to walk the routes, not in grim silence, but telling the small stories of each corner, so that no lamp would ever again sit alone long enough to forget itself. Wren grew up to become the keeper of the first flame, the smallest and most important lamp in the whole vale, and she carried Bram's warm, tender heart over her heart for the rest of her long life. She trained the apprentices who came after her, and she taught them the new old rule, and she taught them the 17 knots, K, and she taught them to hum to a frightened lamp the way you would call a frightened animal home, K. And every single one of them learned the story of the night 3 children walked down into the forgetting and brought back the beginning of everything, because that was a story far too important to ever be allowed to go gray. And now you know why the lamp at the end of your street has never once gone out. Somewhere, tonight, someone is keeping the smallest promise on your behalf. Someone is walking a quiet route in the dark so that your part of the world stays remembered and warm. You will probably never see them, and they would not want you to. They only want you to do the one thing the whole city of Halcyon Vale exists to protect. They want you to rest. They want your shoulders to go heavy and your breathing to go slow and your mind to set down, just for tonight, everything it has been carrying. The lamps are lit. The line is held. The first flame is warm, and it is not alone, and neither, while I am sitting here telling you this, are you. So close your eyes now. Cool. The lamplighters are awake so that you do not have to be. Okay. The dark outside your window is the gentle kind, the kind that keeps its manners, the kind that has been promised to. And the very last thing I will tell you, the thing Bram told Wren, and Wren told everyone after her, is the truest thing I know. A thing that is remembered never goes dark. You are remembered. Good night.